Hello, everybody, and welcome. Today, I'm going to read and explain a Greek myth called Phaethon, son of Apollo, or also pronounced Phaeton. Okay, if you look at this, it talks about building cultural context. How the heroes of ancient Greece were highly revered. A hero might have had one parent who was as a god, and another who was human. Some of you might know that as being like a demigod or part god, right? And then usually they had amazing attributes, incredibly beautiful or incredibly strong or all of the above, right? Incredibly brave, just heroes. They're truly heroic. Both gods and heroes had character flaws, though, similar to those of ordinary human beings like you or I, where we have plenty of flaws. There's lots that's wrong with you and I. And you're like, well, speak for yourself, man. I'm perfect. Don't worry. I know I have flaws. So that's something that a lot of the heroes didn't really realize about themselves, is that they were deeply flawed individuals despite having attained such greatness, such arete, such true awesomeness. And the difficult part there is that they were deeply flawed, and those flaws are what bring about their downfalls. Now, let's take a look at, so they want you to set a purpose before you begin to read. Look at the artwork that accompanies the story. It's pretty interesting artwork if you look at it here, right? You can see a chariot here. You see some horses drawing the chariot, and you see all these colors sort of mixed around. You get the sense of a sky over here, and then over here we have, looks like some, you have the red, the intensity of burning or fire, and you have this image here. This I find to be very interesting. It almost, I don't know about you, but to me, it almost looks like something you'd find at a burial site, right? But we'll see. We got to read the myth after all. All right. Now, and it comes to analyzing literature, allegories. Allegories are awesome symbolic stories that sort of have a universal message that can be applied to our lives. Hence, mythology lends itself well to allegory and understanding key things about who we are as individuals by understanding what other people are like, or heroes in particular. And this particular version has been retold by Olivia Coolidge. Though Apollo always honored the memory of Daphne, she was not his only love. Another was a mortal, Clymene, by whom he had a son named Phaethon. Phaethon grew up with his mother, who, since she was mortal and could not dwell in the halls of Olympus or in the palace of the sun, she lived not far from the east in the land of Ethiopia. And as her son grew up, she would point to the place where Eos, goddess of the dawn, lighted up the sky and tell him that there his father dwelt. Phaethon loved to boast of his divine father as he saw the golden chariot riding high through the air. He would remind his comrades of other sons of gods and mortal women who, by virtue of their great deeds, had themselves become gods at last. He must, so this is interesting. You notice that he is constantly reminding everybody of just how great he was. And then it ends sort of this thought and this idea, not the paragraph, mind you, but the thought and the idea with all of these other great descendants of gods and goddesses had all themselves become immortal. And so you can sense that he wishes to be immortal. And it goes on to say, he must always be first. This is Phaethon, remember? He must always be first in everything. In most things, this was easy, since he was in truth stronger, swifter, and more daring than the others. Even if he were not victorious, Phaethon always claimed to be first in honor. He could never bear to be beaten, even if he must risk his life in some rash way to win. And so this is where the warning flag should go up. He takes tremendous pride in being the best, always has to be number one. And if he's not first, he's honorably the first. I'm not the champion, but I'm the people's champion, right? Like, come on. You're not really the best unless you're the best. But in his mind, he won't accept anything else except being considered the best of the best. That, do you know what that is? If you said pride, you got it right. And if you said that's hubris, well, I don't know what you're watching this video for. You obviously know everything already. You don't need me, right? This is a false sense of pride or position, also called hubris. Most of the princes of Ethiopia willingly paid Phaethon honor since they admired him greatly for his fire and beauty. There was one boy, however, Epiphos, who was rumored to be a child of Zeus himself. Since this was not certainly proved, Phaethon chose to disbelieve it and to demand from Epiphos the deference that he obtained from all others. Epiphos was proud too, and one day he lost his temper with Phaethon and turned on him, saying, "You are a fool to believe all that your mother tells you. You are all swelled up with false ideas about your father." Crimson with rage, the lad rushed home to his mother and demanded that she prove to him the truth of the story that she had often told. "Give me some proof," he implored her, "with which I can answer this insult of Epiphos. It is a matter of life and death to me, for if I cannot, I shall die of shame." It's interesting. So he feels as though he's going to die of shame because of what someone else said about something that can't really be proved beyond a shadow of a doubt. And what does it matter if you believe it in your heart, right? Those are some of the questions you ought to be asking yourself. What does this tell you about Phaethon, that he is so concerned about what someone else might say or think or tell him about him, who he is? He's upset that somebody else is trying to define who he is rather than being focused on defining himself. And yet he can't bear it. His pride won't let him bear it. "I swear to you," replied his mother solemnly, "by the bright orb of the sun itself, that you are his son. If I swear falsely, may I never look on the sun again, but die before the next time he mounts the heavens. More than this I cannot do, but you, my child, can go to the eastern palace of Phoebus Apollo. It lies not far away, and there speak with the god himself." And there's the adventure quest. Hey, go here, do this. That's what all heroes must do, right? Phaethon's no different. He has to go there and do this. Now, here's the catch. This is the stated reason for him going there, right? So, if you want to find the truth, go there. That's the stated reason. Now, the real reason for him to go there, interestingly enough, lines up with what most hero quests are about: self knowledge. And so, if he can gain self knowledge here, he can learn more about himself. Are there any possible impediments or barriers or things that might impede his ability to know himself? Keep that in mind as we read. The son of Clymene leaped up with joy at his mother's words. The palace of Apollo was indeed not far. It stood just below the eastern horizon, its tall pillars glistening with bronze and gold. Above these, it was white with gleaming ivory, and the great doors were flashing silver, embossed with pictures of earth, sky, and sea, and the gods that dwelt therein. Up the steep hill and the bright steps climbed Phaethon, passing unafraid through the silver doors, and stood in the presence of the sun. Here at last he was forced to turn away his face, for Phoebus sat in state on his golden throne. It gleamed with emeralds and precious stones. White on the head of the god was a brilliant diamond crown upon which no eye could look undazzled. Does that sound truly beautiful and wondrous and awe-inspiring? I think it does. It's pretty incredible, right? And so all of this wonder, all of this amazement will serve the author's purpose in some way, manner, or fashion, yes? Keep that in mind. Phaethon hid his face, but the god had recognized his son, and he spoke kindly, asking him why he had come. Then Phaethon plucked up courage and said, "I come to ask you if you are indeed my father. If you are so, I beg you to give me some proof of it, so that all may recognize me as Phoebus' son." The god smiled, being well pleased with his son's beauty and daring. He took off his crown so that Phaethon could look at him, and coming down from his throne, he put his arms around the boy and said, "You are indeed my son, and Clymene's, and worthy to be called so. Ask of me whatever thing you wish to prove your origin to men, and you shall have it." All right, everybody knows, what do you get if you get one wish? If you didn't answer a million more wishes, what's wrong with you? Come on. So he gets one thing. He's one thing that his father, the god Phoebus Apollo, is going to give to him. Right? What does he ask for? Phaethon swayed for a moment and was dizzy with excitement at the touch of his god. His heart leaped, the blood rushed into his face. Now he felt that he was truly divine, unlike other men, and he did not wish to be counted with men anymore. He looked up for a moment at his radiant father. Let me drive the chariot of the sun across the heavens for one day, he said. Apollo frowned and shook his head. I cannot break my promise, but I will dissuade you if I can. Okay, it's going to try and dissuade him. He's going to try and, get him to lean towards something else because this is not a good idea. This is dangerous. How can you drive my chariot, whose horses need a strong hand on the reins? The climb is too steep for you. The immense height will make you dizzy. The swift streams of air in the upper heaven will sweep you off your course. Even the immortal gods could not drive my chariot. How then can you be wise and make some other choice? Okay, he lays it out for him. Will Phaethon take the warning from his godly father? What do you think? What character trait would keep him from backing down? You guessed it, his pride, his false sense of pride, because he falsely believes that he truly is godly, and he is not a god. The pride of Phaethon was stubborn, for he thought the god was merely trying to frighten him. Besides, if he could guide the sun's chariot, would he not have proved his right to be divine rather than mortal? For that, he would risk his life indeed. Once he had seen Apollo's splendor, he did not wish to go back and live among men. Therefore, he insisted on his right, and Apollo had to give way. See, this is interesting. So we have a case where the parent promises the child something, but warns the child that what their choice is a very dangerous choice, but the child insists anyway, despite what all the wisdom of the ages is telling you. Sound familiar? You ever have somebody warn you against something? Do you ever just take the warning as, oh, whatever, you're just trying to scare me? Trying to scare me into studying, tell me this thing's going to be too hard. And then you take it and you fail it miserably because it was too hard? Okay, so remember, sometimes the people who have more experience, or the gods who have more experience, might actually be speaking from a point of wisdom and not merely trying to warn you of something or perhaps distrusting your abilities. Perhaps it really is legitimate. When the father saw that nothing else would satisfy the boy, he bade the hours bring forth his chariot and yoke the horses. The chariot was of gold and had two gold rimmed wheels with spokes of silver. In it there was room for one man to stand and hold the reins, or one god, I suppose. Around the front and sides of it ran a rail, but the back was open. At the end of a long pole there were yokes for the four horses. The pole was of gold and shone with precious jewels, the golden topaz, the bright diamond, the green emerald, and the flashing ruby. While the hours were yoking the swift, pawing horses, rosy fingered dawn hastened in the gates of heaven to draw them open. Rosy fingered dawn? Do you know that? That's an illusion. And if you know what's an illusion too, that's pretty awesome, because I guess you know a little of your Greek mythology, right? It comes from, you guessed it, Homer's Odyssey. Meanwhile, Apollo anointed his son's face with a magic ointment that he might be able to bear the heat of the fire breathing horses and the golden chariot. At last, Phaethon mounted the chariot and grasped the reins. The barriers were let down, and the horses shot up into the air. Can only assume this is going to end splendidly, right? At first, the fiery horses sped forward up the accustomed trail, but behind them, the chariot was too light without the weight of the immortal god. It bounded from side to side and was dashed up and down. Phaethon was too frightened and too dizzy to pull the reins, nor would he have known anyway whether he was on the usual path. As soon as the horses felt there was no hand controlling them, they soared up with a fiery speed into the heavens till the earth grew pale and cold beneath them. Phaethon shut his eyes, trembling at the dizzy, precipitous height. It's way too high for him, and it's so steep he can't handle it. Then the horses dropped down more swiftly than a falling stone, flinging themselves madly from side to side in panic because they were masterless. Phaethon dropped the reins entirely and clung with all his might to the chariot rail. Meanwhile, as they came near the earth, it dried up and cracked apart. Meadows were reduced to white ashes, cornfields smoked and shriveled, cities perished in flame. Far and wide on the wooded mountains, the forests were ablaze, and even the snow clad Alps were bare and dry. Rivers steamed and dried to dust. The great North African plain was scorched until it became the desert that it is today. Even the sea shrank back to pools and caves until dried fishes were left, baking upon the white hot sands. At last, the great Earth Mother, that would be Gaia, called upon Zeus to save her from utter destruction, and Zeus himself hurled a mighty thunderbolt at the unhappy Phaethon, who was still crouched in the chariot, clinging desperately to the rail. The dart, lightning bolt, cast him out, and he fell flaming in a long trail through the air. The chariot broke in pieces at the mighty blow, and the maddened horses rushed snorting back to the stable of their master, Apollo. Well, that ended in a fiery mess. Unhappy Clymene and her daughters wandered over the whole earth, seeking the body of the boy they loved so well. When they found him, they took him and buried him. Over his grave they wept and could not be comforted. At last, the gods, in pity for their grief, changed them into poplar trees, which weep with tears of amber in memory of Phaethon. So the sap, right? It's amber colored because it's golden, just like the golden child of Phaethon, right? So we get these interesting blends of why things are the way they are. We get an explanation for deserts like the Saharan desert, right? And we get explanations for parts of the earth being colder than others because they flew so far away initially. And we also get a clear understanding of the rashness of youth and the rashness of hubris, false sense of pride or position, right? And we see he makes this error in judgment where he doesn't judge the advice or the wisdom given by Apollo properly. He feels that he's being warned falsely and that somebody doesn't have enough faith in who he is, rather than taking the warning as what it actually is, a real and legitimate warning, right? Okay, well, that's Phaethon in a nutshell. I hope you enjoyed this little trip down mythology lane. And if you like this, please like, subscribe, comment, and also you can hit that bell right next to the subscription button to know immediately when I upload another video. In addition, if you would be so kind as to leave a comment about what myth you would like me to cover with you next, I'd be happy to cover any of these Greek myths that you're interested in. And I can even go more depth or pull back a little bit and just gloss over things. Depending on what you want, let me know in the comments. I would really appreciate it. Have a great day.